Welcome the anointed ones. The truth will set you free, but first it will shatter everything you thought you knew. Let that sit for a second. Because what I'm about to tell you isn't a misunderstanding, a harmless rumor, or a social mishap. No. What they did wasn't a mistake. It was a targeted demolition of someone innocent. Here's a chilling fact. Psychology Today reports that false accusations and smear campaigns trigger the same trauma responses as physical assault. So no, it's not just drama. It's emotional warfare dressed in gossip and gaslighting. They didn't just attack a person, they attacked someone who did nothing wrong, and somehow that made them the perfect target. Why? Because some people don't want justice. They want a show, preferably with pitchforks and popcorn. And let's be real. In today's world, being innocent is no defense. If anything, it's a red flag to those who thrive on chaos. You didn't break a rule. You broke their illusion, and for that, they tried to break you. But here's the plot twist no one saw coming. You're still standing, louder, smarter, sharper, and you're about to tell it all. Let's begin, shall we? Number 1. They didn't just attack you. They attacked what they could never control. They didn't attack you because you did something wrong. They attacked you because you refused to be controlled. That's the truth most people miss. This wasn't about your actions. It was about your presence, the way you carried yourself, the way you didn't shrink, didn't second-guess your worth, didn't wait for permission to exist fully. That kind of energy threatens people who are used to being in control. They don't know what to do with someone they can't manipulate, shame, or intimidate into silence. So they flipped the script. They made you the problem. They painted you as the villain, the outsider, the one who needs to be dealt with. Not because you actually caused harm, but because your honesty, your strength, or even just your peace made them confront things they didn't want to face in themselves. You didn't play their game, so they flipped the board. Some people only feel powerful when they have someone to look down on. You didn't give them that satisfaction. You didn't lower your standards, didn't play dumb, didn't laugh at the joke that wasn't funny. And for that, they saw you as defiant, difficult, dangerous, even though you were just being real. This is what people don't understand about targeted cruelty. It's not always loud. It doesn't always come with a warning. Sometimes it wears a smile. Sometimes it starts with a joke, a passive-aggressive comment, a cold shoulder that turns into a full-on campaign. And when the dust settles, you're left wondering how simply being yourself turned into a threat. But here's the brutal, freeing truth. They came for you because they couldn't shape you. That means you're not weak. You're unbreakable in a way they couldn't handle. You being fully yourself unapologetically, without fear, that's what scared them. And deep down, they know it. Number 2, you were the scapegoat for their unhealed wounds. They didn't come at you because of who you are. They came at you because of what's unresolved in them. You became the outlet for pain they've never dealt with. The truth is, hurt people don't always heal. Some of them just pass their hurt along to the next easiest target. You were in the wrong place at the wrong time, with the right energy that made them feel exposed. That's when you became their scapegoat. What they did to you wasn't random. It was a release. Not for you, for them. They needed someone to blame, someone to unload on, someone to carry the emotional garbage they've been holding on to for years. And they chose you, not because you deserved it, but because you didn't. You were too calm, too kind, too grounded. You didn't bite. You didn't match their chaos. That kind of balance makes unstable people spiral. They didn't have the strength to look inward, so they turned everything outward. Their insecurities became your flaws. Their anger became your attitude. Their fear of being irrelevant became your threat. They made you the villain in a story they wrote to avoid dealing with their own reflection. It's easier to label someone else as the problem than admit you're still haunted by wounds you never addressed. That's why none of it made sense. That's why you kept replaying it, trying to figure out what you did to trigger it. But the honest answer is, you didn't do anything. You just existed. You walked in the room with light they couldn't fake, and that light hit the parts of them they've worked so hard to hide. What they did to you was cruel, but it wasn't personal. It was deeply personal for them. You simply got caught in the path of someone else's internal storm. And while that doesn't excuse what happened, It explains why the attack felt so sudden, so calculated, so full of projection. They weren't seeing you. They were fighting their own demons. You were just the mirror that wouldn't lie. Number 3. Innocence exposes corruption. Innocence doesn't protect you. Sometimes it paints a bigger target on your back. That's the twisted part no one wants to admit. Being good, honest, or kind can actually make people hate you more. Not because of anything you did, but because your presence highlights everything they're not. Your innocence, your lack of hidden agendas, your unwillingness to play dirty, it exposes them, and people hate being exposed. When you walk into a space and your energy is clean, it unsettles people who are used to operating in mess. It's not that you're judging them, it's that your existence naturally holds up a mirror. And if they've been lying to themselves, manipulating others, or building their identity around masks, that mirror becomes a threat. You didn't call them out with words, you did it just by being real. That's what makes innocent people dangerous in toxic environments. You don't even have to speak to be a problem. That's why some people start a quiet campaign against you. They'll say you're too much, or too quiet, or think you're better. It's not about those words, it's about their discomfort. Your character disrupts their performance. Your transparency ruins their script. You being untouched by their games makes them feel powerless. They want to drag you down, not because you've done anything wrong, but because your integrity makes their behavior harder to justify. And the sad part? A lot of people would rather destroy someone good than admit they need to grow. That's why innocence doesn't guarantee safety. Sometimes it makes you a magnet for resentment. The worst part is, they'll spin it so well that others believe them. They'll twist your calm into arrogance, your boundaries into cruelty, your silence into guilt. But deep down, they know what they're doing. They know they had no reason. And that's exactly what made you so threatening. You didn't do anything to deserve it. And that's what terrified them the most. Number 4, they didn't break you. They exposed their own fractures. They tried to break you, but all they did was expose the cracks in themselves. Every cruel word, every passive-aggressive move, every attempt to isolate you, it wasn't a reflection of your character. It was a spotlight on theirs. People think attacks always reveal the victim, but if you look closely, they reveal the attacker much more. Their behavior under pressure, in conflict, or when they feel insecure tells you everything about their emotional capacity, and for them, the ceiling was low. They needed you to fall apart so they could feel put together. That's the only way their egos could survive. But when you didn't collapse, when you didn't lose yourself in their chaos, it triggered something deeper, exposure. You held your ground, and that silence was deafening. You didn't need to argue or prove anything. Just by standing tall, you revealed how small their character really was. People like that don't attack because they're strong. They attack because they've already lost control of themselves, their emotions, their self-worth. They didn't know how to handle your presence, so they tried to destroy it. That wasn't power. That was panic. Every insult they threw was a confession of their own insecurity. Every false story they told about you was a reflection of what they feared others would see in them. And the more you refused to shrink, the more unhinged they became. That's not because you were being difficult. It's because they were being exposed. They never broke you. You may have bent, you may have questioned, you may have hurt, but you didn't lose who you were. And in the end, that's what they'll never understand. The strength they tried to challenge wasn't loud or performative. It was rooted, quiet, and unshakable. And now the world sees them clearly, not as strong but as fractured people who thought destruction was easier than self-awareness. Number 5. People love justice until it demands they hold their friends accountable. People talk a big game about justice until it lands too close to home. It's easy to demand accountability when the person in the wrong is a stranger, someone easy to hate, someone outside the circle. But when it's a friend, a co-worker, someone they laugh with, someone they benefit from, suddenly it's complicated. Suddenly the facts get blurry. Suddenly silence becomes the default. This is where the masks fall off. Because real justice isn't selective. You don't get to cry, fairness, and then look the other way when the person causing harm is someone you like. But that's what a lot of people do. They stay quiet. They make excuses. They don't want to get involved. They say things like, Well, I wasn't there, or it's not my place. As if silence doesn't take a side, but it does. Silence always protects the one with more power. They call it neutrality, but let's call it what it really is: cowardice. It's prioritizing comfort over conscience. It's pretending not to see because speaking up would mean losing status, disrupting the group, or facing the same treatment you did. So they play safe. They stay friendly with both sides. They act like peacemakers, when in truth, they're enabling harm. And the worst part, they still pretend to be good people. They still post about injustice, still talk about kindness and empathy, still act like they're morally awake. But when their moment came, when justice called for real action, not just pretty words, they disappeared. You learn a lot when you're the one attacked. Not just about your enemies, but about the ones who claim to care. You see who has the spine to stand up, and who folds the second accountability threatens their social comfort. It's a harsh lesson, but a revealing one. Justice isn't real if it only applies to people we don't like. And silence in the face of injustice doesn't make you neutral, it makes you complicit. Number 6. You weren't attacked for doing wrong. You were attacked for not participating in wrong. You didn't get attacked because you crossed a line. You got attacked because you refused to cross it. That's the part that stings the most. You were punished not for doing something wrong, but for choosing not to be part of something that was. You said no to the gossip, no to the backstabbing, no to the quiet cruelty that everyone else had normalized, and that made you the problem. In a group where toxic behavior is the norm, integrity becomes a threat. You weren't going along with the jokes that cut too deep. You weren't laughing at the things that weren't funny. You didn't join the fake smiles, the silent pacts, the behind-the-scenes power games. You kept your hands clean, and that made them furious. Because if you could stay decent, it meant they chose not to. That's what they couldn't stand. You were a walking reminder that it was possible to behave better, and they hated that reminder. They needed you to stoop, to slip, to break character so they could feel better about their own choices. But you didn't. You stayed rooted. You stayed you. And that quiet refusal to become like them made you a mirror they couldn't bear to face. They weren't attacking your behavior. They were attacking your standard. Your presence disrupted their illusion. It made their excuses fall apart. And instead of asking why they felt so exposed, they did the easier thing. They tried to shut you down, attack the mirror, shatter the reflection, get rid of the reminder. So no, this wasn't about a misunderstanding or a clash of personalities. It was about your unwillingness to participate in harm, and their unwillingness to grow. You didn't match their energy, and instead of respecting that, they tried to drag you into the mud. But you didn't go, and that refusal, that line you refused to cross, that's exactly why they came for you. Number 7. Their cruelty was never spontaneous. It was rehearsed. What they did to you wasn't heat of the moment. It wasn't a slip-up, a misunderstanding, or a poor choice made in stress. No. What they did was intentional, thought out, rehearsed. And that's what makes it so disturbing. They had time to pause, time to consider the truth, time to choose decency, and every single time they rejected it. That's not impulsive, that's strategic. That's someone looking at the fork in the road and walking toward cruelty like it owed them something. They didn't lash out once. They kept going. They kept twisting the knife, kept telling the story in a way that made you look like the villain and them like the victim. And they got comfortable doing it. People love to frame these situations as accidents. They didn't mean it. They were just emotional. But no one accidentally sustains a lie. No one unintentionally gathers people to turn against someone. That kind of behavior doesn't happen without effort. The way they manipulated others, distorted facts, fed the tension, that's not spontaneous, that's performance. They calculated how far they could go without looking guilty. They crafted their words carefully. They smiled while they stabbed, and even when they were given chances to backtrack, to reflect, to make things right, they doubled down. That's not a mistake. That's a decision. This is what makes it so hard to forgive. Not just the betrayal, but the coldness of it. The fact that it was preventable, but they chose to proceed anyway. Again and again. Because in their minds, protecting their ego was worth more than protecting your dignity. And now, they'll probably want to rewrite history. Say it was all just drama. Say they didn't realize, but you know better. You saw the effort they put into the damage, the follow-ups, the whispers, the fake apologies meant to save face, not make amends. They weren't out of control. They were fully in it. And that truth, that burns deeper than any outburst ever could. Number 8. You survived the most dangerous weapon, character assassination. They didn't just try to hurt your feelings. They tried to erase your identity. Character assassination is the most vicious weapon because it doesn't aim for your body. It aims for your reputation, your credibility, your sense of self. They didn't want to argue with you. They wanted to make sure no one listened to you ever again. They wanted to poison the room before you even walked in. That kind of attack is slow, calculated, and personal. It's done in whispers, in half-truths, in concerns disguised as care. It's pretending to be confused about who you are when deep down they know exactly what they're doing. And the scariest part? It works. Not because what they say is true, but because most people believe what they hear first and question it last, if ever. They stripped you of the benefit of the doubt. They rewrote the version of you that people saw, and they did it with surgical precision. You weren't just defending yourself from a lie. You were trying to recover from the emotional fallout of being misunderstood by people who never even gave you a chance. That's not drama. That's psychological warfare. Unlike a physical wound, this kind of attack doesn't scab over. It lingers. It shakes your confidence, makes you second-guess your tone, your words, even your silence. You start wondering if you should shrink just to be safe. That's how deep the damage goes. But the fact that you're still here, still standing, still yourself, that's power. That's resilience most people will never understand. Because it's not just about surviving the attack. It's about not letting it turn you into something you're not. You didn't retaliate with the same venom. You didn't start becoming the story they told. You stayed grounded even while they tried to bury you under lies. And now your truth is louder than their narrative. You're not just alive, you're undeniable. Number 9. They counted on your silence. You owe them your voice. They never expected you to speak. That's the part they were banking on. They thought if they threw enough dirt on your name, you'd stay quiet, just trying to clean it off. They thought shame would shut you down, that you'd isolate, retreat, overthink, blame yourself, and eventually fade into the background. That was their plan. Destroy your image, then wait for your silence to do the rest. Because silence to them was surrender. And let's be real. Many people fall for that trap. They don't speak up because they don't want to seem dramatic. They don't want to stir the pot. They think staying quiet makes them the bigger person. But here's the truth. There's a difference between peace and suppression. And what they did wasn't something you rise above. It's something you call out. You don't owe them silence. You don't owe them protection. What you owe to yourself is your voice. Because your truth is not just healing for you, it's exposure for them. The more you speak, the more their lies unravel. The cracks in their story get wider. The version of events they sold starts to fall apart when held up against your clarity, your receipts, your lived reality. And no, you're not being bitter. You're not holding a grudge. You're telling the story they tried to bury, and guess what? People need to hear it. Not for drama, not for revenge, but because truth spoken clearly without shame has power. It restores dignity. It reclaims space. It reminds everyone watching that silence is not the only way to survive. You already took the hit. Now, take the mic. Because now isn't the time to shrink. It's the time to shatter the narrative they built around you and replace it with the one they never saw coming. The truth spoken without apology by the very person they tried to silence. Number 10. The loudest people are often the most insecure. The ones who screamed the loudest about you weren't strong. They were terrified. That's what people often miss. The louder the attack, the more desperate the attacker. They needed volume because they didn't have substance. They needed numbers because they lacked truth. And they needed chaos because clarity would have exposed everything. Insecure people don't fight fair, they fight loud. They rely on noise, drama, and attention because it distracts from how empty their arguments actually are. They turn up the volume to cover up the fact that they're projecting. They build mobs not because they're powerful, but because they know they can't stand on their own. That's why it was never just one person. It had to be a group. It had to be a scene. Because the fear wasn't just of you, it was of what you reflected back to them. You didn't need to scream. You didn't have to perform. That's what made them so unsettled. You were calm, still, solid. And people in alignment don't need to raise their voice. They are the voice. You didn't need backup because the truth doesn't beg for an audience. It just is. And when you hold that kind of presence, those out of alignment with themselves start to panic. Because you weren't reacting, you were revealing. And that kind of unshakable energy makes people who thrive on performance feel naked. So they yelled, they exaggerated, they twisted every word and moment, hoping the noise would drown out your quiet refusal to crumble. But deep down, even they knew it wasn't strength that drove their outrage. It was fear. Fear of being irrelevant, fear of being wrong, fear of you seeing right through them. Their volume was never about you. It was about the silence they couldn't sit with inside themselves. And you? You never had to match their noise. You just had to keep being you, and that's exactly what they couldn't handle. Number 11. Forgiveness isn't owed where there's no accountability. Forgiveness has been twisted into something it was never meant to be, a performance for other people's comfort. But let's be clear. Forgiveness isn't automatic. It isn't owed just because time has passed, or because someone wants to move on without actually doing the work. Real forgiveness starts where accountability begins. If they're not willing to face what they did, own it fully, and repair the damage, they haven't earned your forgiveness. And you're not wrong for withholding it. Healing doesn't mean erasing the truth or pretending harm didn't happen. Some things are inexcusable. Some actions don't get softened by empathy or rationalized by context. Healing means acknowledging what happened, naming it for what it was, and choosing to protect yourself going forward. It's not about excusing them, it's about choosing yourself. That's where boundaries come in. Not as revenge, not as punishment, but as self-respect. Drawing a line doesn't mean you're bitter. It means you finally stopped letting people trample over your peace in the name of keeping things civil. It means you're no longer interested in pretending someone didn't hurt you just to keep things looking neat from the outside. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Some people will call your boundaries drama. They'll say you're holding a grudge. That's because your refusal to let them re-enter your life without consequences disrupts the narrative they want to believe, that they didn't do that much damage, that you're overreacting, that time should have washed it all away. But healing isn't a free pass. It's a path, and they don't get to walk beside you on it if they haven't done the work to deserve that place. Forgiveness can be beautiful when it's real, but it's not a requirement. And if someone refuses to be accountable, refuses to change, and still expects your grace, that's not reconciliation. They're asking you to betray yourself, and you don't owe that to anyone. Number 12. This wasn't drama. This was abuse dressed in groupthink. Calling it drama was their first line of defense. It minimizes, distracts, and makes you look irrational for reacting to something that was deeply damaging. But what happened wasn't petty conflict. It wasn't some misunderstanding blown out of proportion. It was abuse, wrapped in manipulation, coded in groupthink, and dressed up to look like a clash of personalities. That language wasn't innocent. It was strategy. By labeling it drama, they turned your pain into entertainment. They made your boundaries seem overreactions. They diluted your truth so they could stay comfortable in their roles, whether that was instigator, enabler, or silent witness. And worst of all, they used that label to silence you. Because if it's just drama, why are you still talking about it? Why haven't you moved on? That's how they gaslight you into guilt. But let's call it what it really was: abuse of power, emotional manipulation, and psychological targeting. It wasn't just a disagreement, it was a coordinated effort to undermine, isolate, and discredit you. They didn't just dislike you. They tried to erase you. They weaponized social dynamics, built narratives behind closed doors, and acted like their collective cruelty was justified because others were clapping along. That's not drama. That's mob mentality, and it leaves real scars. When people downplay abuse to keep the peace or protect someone's reputation, they're not being neutral. They're enabling harm. They're sending a message that comfort matters more than truth, and that survival should be quiet and polite. But healing requires naming things, and healing can't happen where the truth is still being softened for the sake of appearances. You weren't being dramatic. You were being honest. And refusing to water down what happened is not bitterness, it's clarity. What they did wasn't a spat. It wasn't messy. It was calculated. It was cowardly. And it was abuse. Now it's time to call it what it always was. Because naming the truth isn't about vengeance, it's about liberation. Number 13. Some people don't want you cleared. They want you permanently stained. Some people don't want closure. They don't want you to heal or move on. What they want is something far darker, to keep you marked, tainted, permanently stained in the eyes of others. Because if you're seen as damaged or problematic, it's easier for them to justify their actions and keep you in a lower place. It's a way to control the narrative, to hold power over you long after the initial attack. This isn't about fairness or resolution. It never was. It's about maintaining a hierarchy where they sit above you, untouched by accountability or growth. They don't want to face their own flaws or change because that would mean admitting weakness. Instead, they latch onto your supposed flaws and magnify them, using them as tools to keep you boxed in. They're not interested in reconciliation or truth. They're interested in dominance, keeping you beneath their shadow so they never have to examine themselves in the light. This kind of cruelty isn't just selfish, it's a desperate attempt to preserve their fragile egos at your expense. But here's the truth they fear. Your worth isn't defined by their judgment. Their attempts to stain you only reveal their fear. Fear that you might rise above, that you might grow beyond their reach, that their power over you is an illusion. They cling to your downfall because it's the only way they feel safe. So when they work to keep you stained, remember it's their insecurity talking, not your truth. You're not the problem. Their refusal to change is, and no amount of trying to keep you down will stop you from eventually standing taller than they ever imagined. Number 14. The apology you deserve may never come, but neither will their peace. The apology you deserve might never arrive, no matter how much it should. Some people don't have the courage or the empathy to face the damage they caused and say the words that could begin to make things right. But here's the irony. While they may dodge accountability and avoid making amends, the peace they desperately need will also evade them. That weight they try to unload onto you, it doesn't disappear, it festers. What they did to you isn't something you simply forget. It echoes in your life, shaping your experiences and forcing you to grow in ways you never expected. But while you move forward, heal, and reclaim your story, they're left behind, haunted by their choices, the lies they told, the truth they buried. Their conscience won't let them rest easy. Even when the crowd moves on, even when the noise dies down, their internal unrest lingers. They might pretend to be fine on the outside, laugh with others, or bury their guilt under excuses, but inside there's a nagging voice, a shadow of regret they try to ignore. It's the echo of the person they hurt, the reality they can't erase, the truth they denied. And no matter how hard they try, that echo doesn't go away. Meanwhile, you're not trapped in that cycle. You have the power to heal, to rebuild, and to redefine yourself on your terms. You carry your truth without shame. The silence you might have been forced into is now your strength. They may never give you closure, but your peace is yours to claim. So while they wrestle with their ghosts, remember, healing is your victory. And sometimes the most powerful justice is watching those who hurt you fail to find their own peace. What they did to you was more than just an attack. It was an attempt to rewrite your story, to diminish your light, and to cage your spirit. But in that attempt, they revealed far more about themselves than about you. Their cruelty, their desperation, their cowardice, all of it stands exposed now, crystal clear in the harsh light of truth. You survived not because you were weak or silent, but because you refused to be broken by lies, rumors, or betrayal. Your survival is a testament to your strength, your integrity, and your unwavering refusal to let their darkness define your path. Remember this. Healing is not a quiet surrender, but a powerful reclaiming of your voice and your identity. It's a refusal to let others' failures dictate how you see yourself. It's setting boundaries, not out of bitterness, but out of respect for your own worth. Forgiveness isn't owed where there's no accountability, and peace isn't granted by those who never sought to make amends. Your journey forward is yours alone to own, shaped by your courage to face pain without losing yourself. The narrative they tried to force on you is shattered, piece by piece, with every truth you speak, every step you take toward your own light. The loudness of their lies only highlights their insecurity. The mobs they built only reveal their fear of your strength. And though the apology you deserve might never come, your healing will outlast their regrets and hauntings. You are not just surviving. You are rising, transforming wounds into wisdom, silence into clarity, and pain into power. This moment is not the end of your story. It's a turning point, a call to reclaim what was stolen, your dignity, your peace, and your truth. Hold your head high, because those who attacked you counted on your silence. Instead, you have chosen to roar. The louder your voice, the clearer your truth, the more impossible it becomes for their lies to stand. You are not the damage done to you. You are the light that refuses to be extinguished, and that, above all, is the greatest victory. If this message resonated with you, don't keep it to yourself. Hit that subscribe button and join our community where truth and strength come first. Like the video to show your support, share it to spread awareness, and drop a comment below to let us know your story or your thoughts. Your voice matters here, and together we create a space where healing, honesty, and empowerment thrive. Let's keep this conversation alive, because nobody should face injustice alone. God bless you.